listening to Spoonie Radio, our Friday the 13th edition of the show. I'm your host, Dr. Courtney Craig. Today I'm joined by Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum. Dr. Teitelbaum is medical director of the Practitioners Alliance Network and creator of the popular free smartphone app, Cures A to Z. He's also the best-selling author of several books, including From Fatigue to Fantastic, Pain Free 123, the Beat Sugar Addiction Now series, Real Cause, Real Cure, and the Fatigue and Fibromyalgia Solution. He's the lead author of 4 studies on effective treatment for fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, and a study on effective treatment of autism using allergy elimination techniques. Dr. Teitelbaum has appeared on Good Morning America, CNN, Fox News Channel, The Dr. Oz Show, and Oprah and Friends. He's speaking to us today from Kona, Hawaii. Aloha, Dr. T.
Aloha, Courtney. Great to be with you.
Thank you so much. Welcome. Your work has been really influential in my own recovery, and part of what really drew me to it is the fact that you yourself had CFS and you knew what it was like to live with this every day. So can you briefly describe your CFS journey and how it affected your medical training, your life, and where you are today?
It is funny. I was in medical school at the time, and it was quite the education for me to be on the other side of the white coat. I had what I call the drop-dead flu, one of these nasty viral infections. 6 weeks later, was still, could barely get out of bed. And all the king's horses, all the king's men, the professors, all of them, they knew there was a virus, but I wasn't getting better, so they figured, well, it must be depressed med student syndrome, they called it. And finally, I had to drop out. And since I was paying my own way, that meant no work study, no loan, no scholarship. I was basically homeless, sleeping in parks. Mm-hmm. And it's as if the universe put a holistic medical school sign on my park bench. Naturopaths came by, herbalists came by, chiropractors came by, energy workers. And each of them taught me a piece of the puzzle. It was really pretty remarkable. And sometimes they even fed me, because if they give me a slice of pizza, I'd eat. Otherwise, fasting wasn't that foreign to me. So I still gave going a day or two without food. But, and I put all these pieces together, and it's what taught me what I needed to know so that I could recover and get well. Since then, I spent the last 35 plus years researching about this, teaching about it, and watching rising stars like you who are now coming and integrating the work that I'm doing and many others, making it their own and taking it to the next level. It's awesome.
That's awesome, yeah. Your story is so similar to mine. It parallels so well. And in a lot of ways, I feel that getting sick is almost more of a blessing than it was a curse, because I don't know who I would be today if not for my CFS illness. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And what I would notice is much easier to recognize that being on the other end now that we're better.
Yes, absolutely. That's true. So your protocol you call SHINE. Can you walk us through SHINE? What does SHINE stand for? Describe your protocol to us.
Well, for people with CFS and fibromyalgia, it basically represents an energy crisis where people have blown a fuse, called the hypothalamus. And to get well, you need to restore energy production. SHINE is kind of a structure for doing that. So the S stands for sleep. The circuit breaker that people blow controls sleep, so they can't get restorative sleep. So giving them whatever they need to get solid sleep. Hormonal support. That circuit controls virtually the entire hormone system. So thyroid, adrenal, reproductive hormones, other hormones. And again, it's not based on the blood testing, which is, what's the medical term I'm looking for? Well, taka. I mean, the blood tests are horribly unreliable. They're based on the person, the symptoms, how they respond to treatment. I would be infections, especially candida, although certainly Lyme and a host of other infections can be involved. Nutritional support for N, and exercise as able. If you exercise too much, you will get post-exertional fatigue and crash and burn. But if you don't exercise at all because you're afraid of that, you will decondition. Also not a good thing.
Right. Now, is there one part of this that you think is more important than the other? Where do you start with the SHINE protocol? Do you start with, which letter do you start with?
It depends on the individual. And I'm going to start with the sleep and nutrition at the first visit for most people. Then I'm going to tend to go the hormones. Then I'm going to tend to go with the treating the infections. So conveniently, it's kind of in that order. But what each person needs is totally different.
Right.
It's kind of like there's 100 ways to trip a circuit breaker in your home. There's over 100 ways to trigger CFS and fibro, and they're different patterns. So you really have to tailor the pattern to that individual.
Right. And that's one thing that I really like about this protocol is so many other approaches to treating this illness are just like silver bullet, just treating the virus with antivirals or just treating the thyroid. But you really address all the spokes of the wheel, and I think that's very important, addressing each spoke of the wheel in this puzzle. Now you mentioned diet. One of my readers, Liz from Salt Lake, asked me to ask you, what diet do you think is best for treating this illness?
Well, fortunately, a high salt diet is important. People who salt restrict will crash and burn because of the low adrenal and the low blood pressure issues. Avoiding sugar, excessive sugar, is critical because the sugar, one, drives the adrenal problems and the yeast nuts and drives metabolism crazy in general, drops immune function. So high salt, high water, low sugar. And most people find that a high protein diet spread through the day feels best. Now, the one thing that's really important for people to take away, though, is that there's no one diet that works best for everybody. That's one reason why I think there's such a variety of food on the planet. So you want to listen to what diet feels the best to you. Now, you eat sugar, you'll feel better for an hour, and then you're going to feel like hell. So look overall how it's working. But most people, high protein, low carb, high salt, low sugar, get plenty of water.
Right.
And of course, whole foods, common sense.
Yes, common sense. Now, how's your protocol changed with the new information that we're discovering now with the microbiome and some of the new research that's coming out? Is this changing the protocol in any way?
Well, what we're getting is that if you take a look at different generations, there's different illnesses that are the main causes of death and debility. It used to be infections, and injury and malnutrition were the main killers. Heart attacks used to be very, very, very rare. Now heart attacks and strokes are the biggest killer. And we're moving into the next generation where immune dysfunctions are the biggest killer and the biggest cost of injury and illness, autoimmune disease, immune problems such as CFS and fibromyalgia. And a big, 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 big part of this stems from the gut. It's happening because we have poor digestion, because the enzymes are destroyed in food processing. So we get partially digested food getting to the small intestine. And then we have leaky gut because of the gut infections, including candida, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and other alterations. And so you have partially digested proteins, leaky gut. These get into the body, and these are treated like allergens and infections. They overwhelm the immune system and trigger food allergies. So is it playing a big role? Yeah. But let me give people an image that may help them to understand a little better. It used to be for most of human history, we would be breastfed. We didn't have any stomach acid while we were nursing. And the bacteria that settled in our colon then flourished. We were weaned. We made stomach acid. And from that day on in our life, everything that came into the stomach was sterilized. And the intestinal flora that we had in the large intestine was there for a lifetime. And it stayed that way. Fast forward to the last 0.1% of human history, and we destroyed the enzymes in food processing. We have antibiotics that will wipe out the gut flora in a week. Never happened before in human history. And now we have people taking acid blockers for years. So anything that goes into the stomach goes into the intestines. And if they're not killed, we've turned our gut into a crapshoot, what used to be a very orderly environment. And this is why we're seeing immune issues being the rising issues for this coming 50 years, I would guess.
Right. A lot of overlap with autoimmune disease, autism, and all these mysterious new illnesses that we're seeing. Do you think the answer lies in the gut? I know that there's a big study that's trying to get funded now by Dr. Ian Lipkin looking at the microbiome specifically in CFS. Do you think we'll find the answer in the gut, or is it far more complex than that?
I think an answer is in the gut. I think it's way more complex than that. I think the gut microbiome still fits under the eye and shine. It's an
Yeah.
important piece of the eye. But if you don't treat the dysautonomia, if you don't treat the hormonal things, if you don't treat the nutritional things, if you don't treat all the rest of it, it's going to be one more silver bullet that will do some good, but not take care of the whole puzzle.
Right, right. Now, how is Shine different when you use it for a CFS patient versus if you use it for a fibromyalgia patient? Is there a difference there?
No.
No?
See, that's the only yes and no answer I've given in 15 years. My God, Courtney. No, I'm kidding. The key difference is that when you have pure CFS without the pain, more often you're dealing with infections, especially viral infections, and associated autonomic dysfunction. That's low blood pressure, POTS, NMHSU. So in those cases, I will be focusing on that aspect of Shine. But to me, for most people, CFS and fibromyalgia are the same illness. People ask what's the difference, and I tease when you go into the infectious disease doctor and you come out with a diagnosis of CFS, and you go next door to the rheumatologist, and you'll come out with a diagnosis of fibro.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, do you think that there's a difference with ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis, the severe cases that see more neurology?
And then you go to the English doctor up the hallway and you come out with ME. So again, there's in any 5 people, there are 5 different conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Because CFS is such a god-awful, disaster, crappy name, understandably people with ME want to dissociate from that, and that's fine. But the bottom line is they all represent an energy crisis where you blow a fuse called the hypothalamus, and treating the underlying processes, even if you want to make distinctions, the key is to look at what's going on in any one individual, what label you want to give it. You can call it full moon, I don't care, whatever you want to call it, it's irrelevant. You treat the underlying process.
Right, right. Do you have any experience treating these severe bedbound patients? Do you have any clinical pearls where it's different than a milder case?
Of course. Having treated thousands and thousands of people, Courtney, I've had people who were carried to my office who had to lie down the whole time, and I had to have my ear 3 inches from their mouth for the whole conversation because that's all the energy they had.
Wow.
And again, when you see that kind of severe issue, you want to look at the autonomic dysfunction. You want to look for underlying infections, especially viral infections. You're going to see a lot of small fiber neuropathy that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Treating the infections, antivirals, immune boosters, gamma globulin, in addition to the other treatments, can be helpful. Being a good holistic doctor, I'm going to recommend a treatment called dexedrine. How's that odd? It's like Ritalin in this population because it stabilizes autonomic function. So I tease people, I say, avoid these medications, get the heck off of these different things, and here's some speed. But in this population, it can be very helpful at stabilizing autonomic function. It is overused in ADD and underused in this population.
Interesting. Now, a lot of the research that's coming out is focused on diagnostic criteria and looking for underlying causes. Why do you think the research is not instead focusing on treatment, effective treatment?
I still remember in the early stages of CFS, they had an NIH conference I went to on CFS, and all of the speakers, each of them stood up and said, I have no idea why they asked me to be here. I don't even know what CFS is. And then they go and talk about their area of specialty. And the conclusion of the conference was we can't do any research on CFS because we don't have any diagnostic criteria that are clear-cut or way of telling if people get better. And I wanted to grab them by the neck and say, ask them, but that's not considered scientifically valid because what do people know about themselves? So they're still focusing on trying to lay the foundation. Before you do a study, you need to have your definitions. You need the diagnostic criteria. And, God bless them, they're doing what they need to do. And 100 years from now, they'll have it figured out after we've moved on to the next set of illnesses. In the interim, though, there's no need for us to wait. by bringing together the different pieces. As clinicians, we get to do it. So you had asked about, the bedbound person. From a chiropractic perspective, it's important to realize that dysautonomia is often associated with atlas dysfunction and also with narrowing of the cervical canal. Sometimes it can be Chiari, where the skull brain actually squeezes through the opening of the skull, but more often it's what's called cervical stenosis. And it's not a fixed stenosis. It has to do with the structural issues where you can make a big difference with structural therapies. Has to do with tissue swelling, low thyroid, low B6. Will cause tissue swelling, little bits. These are not fixed in bone. They're movable. So coming with the different pieces, big help here.
That's interesting. I like how you bring in the chiropractic piece.
That's an important piece.
It is an important piece of the complex puzzle. That's one thing with the research that I feel like a lot of it is hindering progress because it's not without studying treatment processes. It almost makes you think that this is an untreatable illness, and that's one thing you really stress in your book. And every time I've heard you speak, like, this is a treatable illness, and I feel like many practitioners and many patients don't appreciate that, and then there's no hope there because of that lack of understanding.
Courtney, we have a bad habit in medicine. It goes something like this: if I don't know what's wrong with you, you're crazy. And that's what they teach us in medical school is, and after the gauntlet we go through of learning the stuff, it's easy to believe that religious philosophy, they think, which is you now know everything you need. And if anybody says they can help somebody, the doctors can't, they're a quack. So you have this thing of the doctor can't help you, but they've been taught that anybody then who can is a quack. And this is why 1 out of 4 adult Americans are unnecessarily in chronic pain. Like 30,000 people a year in the U.S. die from Motrin medications. So for those listening, if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, I don't know what's wrong with you, and implies, so you're crazy, here's what I recommend. Get up, give them a big hug, and say, thank you. Thank you for letting me know up front what an utter fool you are, so I don't waste my time with you. And smile, turn around, walk out the door.
That's excellent advice.
And then if they send you the bill, write back a letter saying, I'm sorry, there's nobody existing, you must be crazy, nobody by that name. And then go to somebody who does know. If the doctor says, I don't know, I'm sorry, let's find somebody else who can help. That's honest.
Yes.
But I don't know, you're crazy. That's abusive. It is not acceptable. Don't tolerate it.
Right. That is excellent advice. And I wish I had that advice many years ago. All the doctors I've been shuffled through, most of us have. You mentioned earlier most of the lab testing is useless, but so could you speak more to that? What kind of testing is useful here?
I would not say the tests are useless. The tests are very helpful. How they are interpreted is useless.
What do you mean?
What happens is that the tests have what's called the normal range. And what doctors don't know is that the normal range has nothing to do with whether the test is healthy or the result is healthy. It's just based on what's called 2 standard deviations. You take 100 people, the 95 in the middle are defined as the normal range, and the 2.5 on the outside would be outliers or abnormal. So if you had a normal range for income, for example, it would be $8,000 a year to, I'm guessing, maybe $160,000. And if you're outside of the normal range, you'd have a problem. Now, poverty is anything under 16,000. So medically, we would define 3/4 of people in poverty as being no problem. So the normal range isn't meant to say if the test is okay. It's meant to give the doctor an idea of where along a group of 100 people you fall, so that they can get a sense in combination with the symptoms. If you fall, the example that I gave Dr. Oz that he likes is shoe sizes. If I had a normal range for shoe sizes, it would be 5 to 13. So say you come to Hawaii, I live on a volcano, we leave the shoes at the door, we don't want to attract lava into the house. And say at the end, I'm wearing a size 8 shoe and you have my size 13. We go to the shoe doctor and you say, Doc, the shoe's falling off my foot. And he says, no, honey, it's a size 13. It's in the normal range, nothing wrong. And I would go in and I say, I can't get my toe in this thing. It's too small. He says, no, size 8 shoe. It's smack dab in the middle of the range. And I'd say, but my toe doesn't go in. He'd start to look at me like, you're crazy. And that's when you give him a hug and walk out. So anyway, so understanding what the test means is very important. Most doctors have not a clue.
And that becomes really important when you look at thyroid panels, right?
Absolutely. The TSH is one of the worst, dangerous tests ever created in the history of humankind. He said subtly. I estimate that it's responsible for upwards of 500,000 deaths a year on the planet.
Wow.
Just because of the role of low thyroid in increasing the risk of heart attack. So you'll see, you have the Hunt trial, for example, where women whose thyroid was in the lower third of the normal range as opposed to the upper third had a 69% increased risk of heart attack. It's pretty dramatic. And those are totally normal tests. TSH of 1.5 to 2.5, in the middle. So anyway, the TSH, what's a medical term I'm looking for? Oh, it's a piece of crap. Excuse my language. It's just so utterly unreliable when used as the sole test for determining the need for thyroid. Let me be a little more blunt. Anyway, I think you get the point.
I think so. So thyroid problems are definitely involved in both fibromyalgia and CFS. So what kind of testing would someone need to really assess their thyroid with this illness?
Well, there's a very high-tech way I have of finding out if they need thyroid. I ask them, are you tired, achy, weight gain, cold intolerant, constipated, have trouble with infertility or miscarriages? And if they answer yes to at least 2 of those, and they have fibromyalgia, I will give them a trial of thyroid hormone, period, and see if they feel better. The exception is if the free T4 blood test is in the upper 20th percentile of the normal range or higher, in which case I will consider an overactive thyroid, which can mimic a low thyroid, contributing to their symptoms.
Mm-hmm. And from your yeah, very high tech. From your experience treating patients, what do you see more often? Do you see hypo, or do you see hyper, or especially like a hyperthyroid with Hashimoto's?
Oh, it's hypo. Low thyroid is far more common in fibromyalgia, but there's many types of low thyroid, and you have to tailor the type of thyroid treatment. For some people, it's just iodine deficiency. You give them the iodine, you're going to feel better. I like to go with a 6.25 milligrams, 6,000 micrograms. A selenium deficiency will contribute to the Hashimoto's. You give 200 micrograms of selenium, it improves Hashimoto's. I don't like to give that high a dose for day to day, but in Hashimoto's I will. Other people have iron deficiency, and again, the iron normal range is insane. The normal range in the iron blood tests will say that 92% of people who have no iron in their blood marrow at all that's visible, the worst form of iron deficiency present, it will say that 92% of them are normal. It's the researchers kind of just wring their hands and go, what are they thinking? The ferritin level has to be over 60, not over 10. But if you don't have enough iron, you can't convert thyroid to the active form. So treating the iron deficiency will help that aspect of low thyroid. You have people who have difficulty with conversion of T4 to T3 for other reasons. You've got T3 receptor resistance. You've got the control center of the circuit in the brain that controls thyroid is underactive. There's so many different things. This is where my kids, I can see their eyes kind of tune out and they go, blah, 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 blah.
Getting a little complicated here, right?
Yeah, I'm not looking, people aren't expected to get, let me get the quick piece of paper and write them all down. This is just, there's many, many different things going on, and there's no one size fits all. You need to adjust different types of thyroid treatment to see what works for each individual.
Right. Do you have opinion on testing for all these different viruses? Do you think that's useful, all these viral titers?
I will check a CMV and HHV6, just the IgG level. That will look for old infection, but if it's very high, if it's over 1 to 4 or 1 to 640, depending on the type of test you're doing, I I will consider antiviral treatments at that point. But most of the testing for most infections in this disease is a waste of money because the IgM only looks for acute infection that started within the last 2 months. That's not what's going on in people who have had CFS for 10 years. They don't look for viral reactivation. So they're just going to say if you had the virus in the past. So the answer by and large is I don't do these big infection panels. What I'd rather do in people, I do those simple tests. I look for gamma globulin subset deficiencies, blah, blah, blah again. But what I do is I go by symptoms. If you have symptoms that suggest an antiviral and immune stimulant would be helpful, I will treat for that. Do you have symptoms suggesting an antibiotic-sensitive infection? Instead of trying to pin it down as Lyme or, all these other different ones. If you tend to have low-grade fever, lung congestion, history of so-called allergic reactions to multiple antibiotics, scalp scabs, things like that, I will give antibiotics. I'm not going to try to label it with a name. I'm just going to say, try it and see if you feel better.
Imagine that. Imagine that. Now, what sort of supplements do you think are really key for the SHINE protocol and getting results here?
Well, we actually, and I know we go through a lot of stuff here. There's a free, and this one, take a piece of paper and write it down, folks. If you go to the website, endfatigue.com, E like Nancy, D like David, and then the word fatigue.com, you'll see a free energy analysis program. People can do a series of questionnaires. They can even enter in their lab tests if they have them. The lab tests aren't critical, but it will analyze the pertinent ones. And then it will tell people exactly what supplements they need and what medications are most likely to help. And it's different from person to person. And it's free. It's funny, we used to charge $400 for it. It took 2 years to program this thing. It's a computerized doctor. And we actually have the U.S. patent for a computerized doctor. And we told people, though, if they couldn't afford, they could do it for free. And, of course, 80% of people wrote back and say, I'm crippled with this disease. I have no money. So we made it free for everybody. And that's my wife's and my gift to the folks with this disease. But it'll tell people what supplements they need. The key things, ribose. And the one I recommend is Corvalin by Douglas Labs. But really, any of the ribose products is fine. 2 studies we've done showed that 5 grams 3 times a day increased energy an average of 61% for people with fibro after 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, they could drop it to 2 twice a day, breakfast and lunch or dinner. There's a vitamin powder called the Energy Revitalization System, where 1 scoop replaces over 35 supplement pills. So 1 drink a day. So what I recommend, because I don't like people taking handfuls of pills all day, take the Corvalin, add a scoop of the vitamin powder, add water. That'll be the best 30 seconds for energy that people spend all day. Beyond that, I can give you another 30 supplements and watch you go blah, blah, blah with your eyes.
Everyone will get pill fatigue with too many supplements. I do like the powdered multivitamin. Now, the D-ribose, can you talk more about the mechanism of action? Doesn't that work on the mitochondria?
Yes, the backbone of energy molecules in the body, ATP, NADH, FADH. It's made of adenosine, which is ribose plus vitamin B4, and phosphate. And the B vitamins. That's what these molecules are made of. And the question was whether we knew that adding B vitamins helps, and that's in the multivitamin. But I wondered one day, well, gee, since this is an energy crisis where there are deficiencies of these energy molecules, might there be deficiency of these other things? So we looked, and there seemed to be plenty of adenine. And so then we tried ribose, and the energy went up 61%. It was like, what the? That was if you see an increase in 10% in energy, that's considered an eye-opener, and you pop champagne after the study. This was average 61%. It was remarkable. And we just are completing a study now looking at the adenine, the vitamin B4 component. And it's showing sleep. So that data will be analyzed in about a month. We're just completing that study now as well.
Great. I will keep an eye out for it. And tell us what else you're working on. You've just developed the Practitioners Alliance Network. We call it PAN for short. Mm-hmm. What is the PAN network?
Well, what it is, it drives me nuts because, like I said, when I came out of medical school, if you draw a pie chart, about things that can help people, um, I was given the impression as a young doctor that what MDs have to offer filled about 98% of the pie chart, and that there's 2% of cute stuff offered by the other quacks in the world who are not MDs. That was a medical idea. And many people out there have been brainwashed that, it's a big business, into a similar thing. Now, about 35 years into being a physician, I've realized that the part of the pie chart that doctors offer is about 15 to 20%. And what everybody else offers makes up the other 80 to 85%. But health practitioners are not communicating. ND doctors don't talk to naturopaths, doctors don't talk to chiropractic doctors, don't talk to the herbalists and homeopaths much, who don't talk to the acupuncturists, who don't talk to the energy workers, who don't talk to it's like different religions. And I tease that the mullahs of medicine are not talking to the priests of the other religion, and we just don't talk to each other. And it's insane. So what I would like to see is to have all of us talking to each other and sharing notes about what works. What do you find helpful? What do so we can learn from each other and teach each other. That's what the PAN Alliance is. It's a group of health practitioners. We have over 250 and growing. And it's a Facebook-like setting where we can talk to each other. And we also offer inducements, like we're negotiating discounts off wholesale on supplements and things so that doctors can make more money and spend more time with people instead of burning out. So that's what the PAN network is for anybody out there who's a health practitioner. That can be a health coach, an educator, anybody who works with helping the public with their health. If you go to the endfatigue.com site, you'll see for practitioners. Just click on that, follow the breadcrumb trail. It'll take you over to the PAN network, and it's free. Now, 3 studies that have already been launched through the PAN network. We've got the study on adenosine. We have a new study. If you know anybody with Alzheimer's disease, so listeners out there, we have a new study using what you call the MIND protocol. This is also a PAN study where the practitioners put their input in. We put together the protocol, and that started this week. So if you know somebody who has Alzheimer's or dementia who would like to get better, they can call my office, 410-573-5389. They have 20 phone numbers. And they can get an appointment, and we can do the consult even by phone if needed. We're expecting that we're going to see a dramatic improvement in people's function, far, far, far greater than the medications. And then there's a third study that was just approved by the PAN IRB using autism, treating autism with NAAT. We had done the first study, but this is a $2 million study with over 1,000 children. And this is under the auspices of the PAN Network IRB. So we're bringing together practitioners from across the board so we can see what works and get that information out to the public. Basically, it's the antidote for big pharma and big medicine having a monopoly on medical information.
Right. Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm really enjoying being a part of the PAN network. There's some really interesting discussions. I've learned a ton just by being in that for the few months that it's been that I've been a part of it.
And you've taught a ton too. You've taught me a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Now you also have a training program in place too, right? For people that practitioners in the PAN network. I saw an email that your goal is you want to have 1,000 new CFS and fibromyalgia doctors by next year or something like that.
Well, within 3 years, because for people to find somebody who has a clue with treating this, you've seen what it's like. It's insane. And so we have an 8-hour online training, and it can be for any health practitioner, whether you're a health coach or professor of medicine or anybody who works for the public. It will teach people what the CFS, fibro, and ME are, the underlying conditions, how to evaluate it, and how to make it go away. And much of it can be done without prescription. A lot of this, each field has different things that they bring to it that the others don't. So it's fun. I mean, it's like we were talking about before the show. What do you do when you see somebody that you can't help? Well, it's nice to know that there's other people who can, and when to send them, when to refer, when to work together, and how to.
Right, right. I know that especially in my profession, it's so hard to have communication between practitioners, and I really hope this helps pave the way to just have better communication. That's really the key. If we all can just communicate better, we all have different tools in our toolbox, and when we put all those tools together, we can really have some effective treatment.
A brilliant statement right there, yes.
You have a new book out, right? Your
The
new
fatigue. Mm-hmm.
And the Fatigue and Fibromyalgia Solution. How is that book different than your From Fatigue to Fantastic?
Well, it's like the difference between reading a medical textbook and reading Cosmo.
It's a great analogy.
It's funny. For years, people said, they love Fatigue and Fantastic because it has over hundreds of scientific references, and it's a textbook.
Yes,
they say with my brain fog, it's like, it's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
But the publisher wouldn't let me do the short version because they said, well, this one's doing too well. We don't want to. So on Facebook, on my Facebook page, at Facebook/Dr. Teitelbaum, I asked people, do you want for the next edition to be the short and simple or just an update of the old one? And 85 people wrote in, they want a short and simple, and one did want to, and so I sent that to the publisher as my market analysis, and they said, okay. So the Fatigue and Fibromyalgia Solution, short, simple, easy read. That'll teach you by the time you're done reading the book, you're going to know what's causing this illness. You're going to know how to get well, and you're going to be back in control of your life. And it's fun.
Yeah, I will have to admit, the nerd in me has read From Fatigue to Fantastic about 3 times. But I do recommend to anyone listening who is not a nerd like I am to definitely pick up a new copy of the Fatigue and Fibromyalgia Solution. Dr. Teitelbaum, do you have any last things that you want to add?
Absolutely, Courtney. A key thing to remember is that if you get well, that you can go back to what made you sick in the first place. 1, we will have done nothing for the person. And 2, your body will get sick again. You'll blow a fuse some other way. So Shine will teach you on a physiological level what you need to do to help restore function. The structural issues can help release the muscles so that along with the physiologic, they'll start to stay released. But the mind-body issue is critical. You need to start getting in touch with what feels good to you. If most people with this disease were approval-seeking people pleasers. We do things to avoid conflict and to make other people go, oh, you're such a good boy and girl. And we have trouble saying this magic word called no. Mm-hmm. And if you think of a recipe for blowing a fuse, not being able to say no is a big one. So I want you to start making lists of those things in your life that feel good and put your energy on those and start withdrawing energy from those things that don't feel good that you're not going to get arrested or homeless for not doing. And that includes people. It's funny. Did you ever notice that when you have a couple days where you had good energy, that somehow you'd be feeling a little better? It's as if you had a neon sign over your head that would say, emotional toxic waste dump open. And these energy vampires would come out of the woodwork. First, they come to the filling station. They put the hooks in you by going, oh, you're so wonderful. I don't know what I'd do without you. Nobody else can listen to me and help. And then after they have the hooks in, they would lift up their emotional toxic waste dump truck and dump it all over you. And then they drive away and say, thank you. And you'd feel like you just got sucked dry by a vampire. So in people in your lives that are like that, I'm going to teach you this magic word. No. Okay. And the way you do that is if something doesn't feel good, you say no. It's very versatile. It can be done graciously. It can be, no, I'm sorry, I can't. Or it can be, I'm not going to shout in the microphone here, but anyway. So bottom line, if something does not feel good, just like we teach our children, if it doesn't feel good, you say no. And you run away if you need to. And you put your attention on things that feel good. And that's the recipe for getting what's called authentic. And when you do that, your body will support you with an enormous amount of energy as you go through the healing process. And that's just that. You can have a life that really feels good.
That's great advice. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Teitelbaum, I want to thank you so much for talking with us today. I look forward to seeing some of the new research that's coming out of the PAN network and whatever else you have in store.
There'll always be fun stuff coming over the horizon, Courtney.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt. Well, let's see. In Hawaii, aloha means hello and goodbye. Is that correct?
Indeed so, and peace and love. So.
Okay, thank you so much. So I guess I will say aloha.